They say every pilot has a story about their worst landing. The one with a 40-knot crosswind that tried to turn their multi-million-dollar aircraft into a weather vane. Or the time the landing gear decided to remain on an unscheduled vacation inside the fuselage. Pilots tell these stories over cheap beer, each one trying to one-up the other. My story would beat them all. The problem was, this wasn't my worst landing. It was my best. And it was, without a doubt, the most illegal landing in the history of civil aviation. MedEvac 73 Kilo, I repeat. Your designated landing zone is Pearson International, runway 24 left. The voice from air traffic control crackled in my headset, dripping with the kind of strained patience reserved for toddlers and madmen. You are 5 miles off course and descending over a populated area. I keyed the mic, my voice a mask of calm I absolutely did not feel. Yeah, about that, Pearson. We're going to have to take a rain check. I'm looking at a rather fetching stretch of blacktop just ahead. 4 lanes recently paved. Minimal traffic, thanks to my colleague. Looks lovely. A beat of stunned silence. Sir, that is Interstate 95. Bingo, I muttered to myself. Give the man a cigar. Into the mic, I said, Sharp eye, Pearson. It's perfect. Tell the boys in blue to close the on-ramps. I'll only be a minute. Sir, for the final time, you cannot land a Learjet on a public highway. It is, well, it's a felony. I glanced at the picture of my daughter, Lily, taped to the console. Her smile, even in a faded photograph, was brighter than the entire instrument panel. Felony is such a strong word, I said, my grip tightening on the yoke. I prefer unprecedented aerial maneuver driven by extenuating circumstances. No. The controller started to say something else, probably involving the words FAA, prison, and psychiatric evaluation, but I was done talking. I had a deadline, and the clock on my daughter's life was ticking louder than the jet's twin engines. 24 hours earlier, the only turbulence in my life was Brenda Higgins. Our neighborhood, the ironically named Harmony Creek Estates, was less a community and more a social experiment in weaponized beige. It was a place where property values were directly proportional to the militant enforcement of the Homeowners Association bylaws, a document thicker than a phone book and twice as boring. And the Grand Inquisitor of this suburban Politburo was Brenda. I was in the backyard, attempting to assemble a new swing set. My engineering skills, honed on the flight dynamics of supersonic jets, proved surprisingly useless against the inscrutable hieroglyphics of Swedish furniture instructions. Lily, my 10-year-old co-pilot in life, was directing my failure from the comfort of the porch steps, wrapped in her favorite fuzzy blanket despite the warm afternoon. A little to the left, Dad, she instructed, her voice small but clear. No, my left. Are you sure you're qualified for this? Maybe we should call a professional. I flew F-16S for a living, sweetie, I grunted, trying to force a bolt into a hole that was clearly a millimeter too small. They don't come with Allen wrenches. Or HOAs, thank God. As if summoned by the mere mention of her unholy cabal, Brenda appeared at my fence line. She moved with the silent, predatory grace of a shark navigating a swimming pool, a clipboard, and a measuring tape her dorsal fin and teeth. Leo, she said. Her voice didn't have warmth. It had angles. The swing set. I sighed, letting the bolt drop to the grass. Brenda, what fresh hell is it today? She ignored my tone, her eyes scanning the half-assembled structure with forensic intensity. It's beige. She said the word like it was a moral failing. The approved color palette for backyard play structures, as outlined in Appendix C, Section 4, Subsection B, is strictly earth tones: forest green, rustic brown, cedar stain. Beige is not an earth tone. It's the color it came in, Brenda. I was more concerned with the structural integrity than the color theory. I gestured towards the porch. It's for Lily. She's been looking forward to it. Brenda's gaze flickered towards Lily for a nanosecond, an expression that might have been pity on a normal human, but on her was probably just gas. Rules are the bedrock of a harmonious community, Leo. They apply to everyone. Consider this your first written warning. She made a neat, vicious little check mark on her clipboard and glided away, leaving a wake of disapproval. What's an earth tone? Lily asked. It's the color of misery, sweetie, I said, finally getting the bolt to catch. The official color of Harmony Creek. Lily had a rare autoimmune disease that had decided, for reasons no doctor could fully explain, that her own liver was the enemy. For 2 years, we'd been living in the strange limbo of the transplant list. 2 years of hospital visits, medication schedules, and holding our breath every time the phone rang. 2 years of watching my bright, vibrant girl get a little paler, a little more tired. The swing set was my pathetic attempt to bring a sliver of normal childhood back into her life. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It wasn't a telemarketer or Brenda complaining that my recycling bin was an inch too close to the curb. It was Dr. Anya Sharma, Lily's transplant surgeon. We have a liver, Leo. The words hung in the air, electric. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly useless. A perfect match, Dr. Sharma continued, her voice radiating a calm professionalism that I clung to like a life raft. It's in Charleston, South Carolina. We have a transport team on standby. The clock, as you know, is ticking. Hope is a dangerous thing. It's a drug. For 2 years, I'd been microdosing it, afraid to take a full hit. Now it was surging through me. Terrifying and exhilarating, I ran to the living room and scooped Lily up in a hug, blanket and all. She was so light. They found one, I whispered into her hair. They found one baby girl. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. Does this mean I can have ice cream? You can have all the ice cream, I laughed. You can have an ice cream factory. I, being the over-prepared, slightly paranoid ex-military man that I am, had a contingency plan. I'd cashed in favors and pulled strings to have a private MedEvac jet on standby at a small local airfield. A buddy of mine, Mike, was the pilot, but I'd be in the co-pilot's seat. I wasn't leaving this to chance. The plan was simple. The organ would be driven from the hospital in Charleston to a regional airport, flown to our local field, and then rushed to Lily's hospital, a clean, efficient chain of custody. Or so I thought. I was at the airfield, running through the pre-flight checklist on the sleek Learjet, when my phone buzzed. It was Dr. Sharma again, but the calm professionalism was gone. She was frantic. Leo, there's a problem, a big one. The transport vehicle is stuck. The driver says there's some sort of protest. They've blocked the main highway out of Charleston. My stomach turned to ice. A protest? About what? He said something about a proposed bike lane. Her voice was laced with disbelief. The driver says the woman leading it is wearing a pink tracksuit and is refusing to move, yelling about property values and community character. The world tilted on its axis. A pink tracksuit. No, it couldn't be. I fumbled with my phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy. I pulled up a live news feed from a Charleston station. And there she was, Brenda Higgins, in all her pastel-hued glory. She'd apparently been visiting her sister. She stood in front of a line of stopped cars, brandishing a handmade sign that read, "Bikes Bylaws." She looked triumphant, like Joan of Arc defending France, if France was a cul-de-sac of overpriced houses and Joan was deeply concerned about the aesthetic impact of two-wheeled vehicles. My daughter's future, the miracle we had prayed for, was being held hostage by a woman whose life was so devoid of meaning she had to import her brand of petty tyranny to another state. The organ had a viability window of just a few hours. The traffic jam was a snake of red taillights stretching for miles. There was no way that cooler was getting to the airport in time. I looked at the picture of Lily on the console. Her brave, tired smile. In that moment, a switch flipped in my brain. The suburban dad who paid his taxes and sorted his recycling was gone. The Air Force pilot who was trained to assess a threat, formulate a plan, and execute the mission took over. I called Mike, who was in the MedEvac jet, already taxiing in Charleston. "Mike, it's Leo. Change of plans." "What? Leo, I'm about to take off. The cooler is supposed to be here any minute." "The package isn't going to make it to you, buddy," I said, my voice eerily calm. "So we're going to the package. I'm taking off now. Meet me over I-95. And Mike, I need you to do something for me. I need you to clear me a runway." And that's how I found myself on final approach to 3 lanes of pristine South Carolina asphalt, with a very stressed-out air traffic controller pleading for my sanity. "Okay, Mike," I said into the headset, my eyes locked on the highway below. "See that break in the traffic? Just after the overpass where Brenda is holding her one-woman revolution? That's our spot. I need you to make a low pass, rattle their windows, get them to pull over." "You are certifiably insane, Leo," Mike's voice crackled back. "You know that, right? This is my pilot's license we're talking about." "Insanity is relative, Mike," I countered, nudging the yoke. "Right now, the craziest person in a 5-mile radius is a woman in velour fighting a phantom war against cyclists. I'm just leveling the playing field. On my mark." The next 90 seconds were the most intense of my life, and I've landed on an aircraft carrier at night. Mike swooped his jet low over the traffic jam. The roar of the engines was biblical. Cars that had been stationary for an hour suddenly scattered like cockroaches, pulling onto the shoulder. It was amazing what a 20,000-pound aircraft flying 100 feet over your head could do for traffic flow. He'd created a perfect, beautiful 3-lane runway. My runway. "Tally-ho," I muttered, and began my descent. The world outside compressed. The trees, the cars, the shocked faces of people standing outside their vehicles, phones held aloft. It was all a blur. My training took over. I wasn't thinking, I was doing. Flaps down, landing gear down, cross-referencing airspeed and altitude. The landing was firm, but clean. The Learjet's wheels kissed the asphalt with a squeal of protest, and I deployed the thrust reversers. The jet slowed, and I brought it to a perfect stop. The nose cone pointed directly at the blockade. The sudden silence was deafening. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Even Brenda was speechless, her bike's bylaws sign drooping in her hand. Then, the sirens started. They converged from all directions, a symphony of official outrage. The first to arrive was a state trooper whose name tag read Miller. He was a tall, grizzled man with a magnificent mustache and eyes that had seen it all. He parked his cruiser at a diagonal, got out, and just stared at the jet for a solid 10 seconds, hands on his hips. He stomped over to my cockpit window. "Son!" he yelled, his voice somehow cutting through the whine of the cooling engines. "I'm going to need you to turn off the multi-million-dollar private aircraft you have illegally parked in the middle of my highway." I popped the window open. "Can't, officer," I said, trying to sound reasonable. "I'm waiting for a delivery." As if on cue, a man in scrubs, who I recognized as the transport driver from a photo doctor Sharma had sent, came sprinting through the parted sea of cars. He was carrying a blue and white medical cooler like it was the Olympic torch. He ran right up to the jet, and I leaned out to take it from him. "Thank you," I said. "You're a lifesaver." He just nodded, breathless and wide-eyed. I held up the cooler for Officer Miller to see. "Emergency medical delivery," I explained. "Organ transplant. This couldn't wait. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a daughter who needs this a whole lot more than you need this lane of traffic." Miller stared at the cooler, then at me, then at the jet. His mustache twitched. He looked over at Brenda, who was now being berated by a dozen angry truck drivers. He sighed the sigh of a man who was profoundly tired of the human race. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. He keyed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, get me a police escort to Charleston General, and, send a tow truck. A really, really big one." The organ, with its own police escort, was whisked away to the hospital. Lily's surgery began, and I was gently, almost apologetically, arrested. The image of me in handcuffs, a slight smile on my face, with a Learjet parked on I-95 in the background, was on every news channel in the country before they even got me to the station. The interrogation room was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, a metal table, and two detectives who looked like they'd been cast in a cop show. One was old and weary, the other young and eager. Good cop, about to be bad cop. "You do realize," the young one started, sliding a thick file onto the table, "that you are facing a laundry list of federal and state felonies, Mr. Maxwell? Reckless endangerment, destruction of public property, interfering with traffic, operating an aircraft in a fundamentally insane manner." I leaned back in my chair. "And yet, the liver got to the hospital with 15 minutes to spare on its viability window, so from an efficiency standpoint, I'd call it a net win." "You could have killed dozens of people," he shot back. "But I didn't," I said calmly. "Statistically, you're more likely to be killed by a vending machine, and I'm a very good pilot. More importantly, I'm a very desperate father. You have kids, Detective?" He looked flustered. The older one stepped in. "That's not relevant, Mr. Maxwell." "Isn't it?" I pressed. "Have you ever seen your kid so sick, so fragile, you'd do anything to fix it? Would you land a jet on a highway? Probably not. You seem like a sensible guy. But would you at least think about it? Would you understand the why?" I then leaned forward. "And have you ever had to deal with an HOA?" The older detective almost cracked a smile. Almost. "They put me in a holding cell to think about what I'd done. I was thinking, all right. I was thinking about Lily, and I was thinking about the jet, which was still a very large, very expensive problem sitting in a South Carolina impound lot. A small television was bolted to the wall in the corner of the cell, playing late-night local commercials. And that's when I saw him. A man with slicked-back hair, a dazzling white smile, and a tool belt slung low on his hips, stood in front of a house that seemed to have a roller coaster in the backyard. "Got a crazy idea?" he said to the camera, oozing charisma. "A project no one else will touch? A dream your wife and the City Planning Commission say is impossible? If you can dream it, we can build it. At Slick Rick's Contracting, we turn impossible into invoiceable." A phone number flashed on the screen. A light bulb didn't just go off in my head, it exploded. I had made one very public, very illegal landing. Now I needed to make my jet disappear. And I suddenly had an idea for a home renovation project that would make Brenda Higgins's head spin. I banged on the cell door. "Guard! I need my phone call. I need to speak to my contractor." Bail was posted by an anonymous donor, which I later learned was a tech billionaire who'd had his own legendary run-in with a zealous HOA over a satellite dish. I walked out of the station into a swarm of reporters. I was a folk hero. A GoFundMe for my legal fees, started by Officer Miller's niece, had already topped 6 figures. The headline on the local paper read, "Pilot Dad to HOA Karen, get off my runway." I was facing a mountain of legal trouble. My pilot's license was suspended indefinitely, and the FAA was promising an investigation so thorough it would make a colonoscopy feel like a casual chat. Back home, the Harmony Creek HOA, with Brenda leading the charge, had already convened an emergency meeting to have me and my unstable criminal tendencies evicted. My first call was to set up a meeting with the man from the commercial. I met slick Rick Ramirez at a greasy spoon diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. He slid into the booth opposite me, smelling faintly of sawdust and confidence. "Leo Maxwell," he said, extending a calloused hand. His grip was like a vice. "The Jet Man. It's an honor. I love your work." "Thanks," I said. "I'm a big fan of your commercials." "All true, my friend. Every last glorious, unpermitted word. So, you got a jet you need moved, and a project. Lay it on me. I live for this stuff." I leaned over the table, lowering my voice. I told him everything. I told him about the jet in impound. I told him about Brenda, the HOA, and the constant, soul-crushing beigeness of my life. And then I told him my idea. My glorious, insane, beautiful idea. "I want you to get my jet back," I said. "And I want you to bring it home. I want you to build me a secret underground hangar right under my backyard, with a retractable runway that looks like a normal lawn." Rick stared at me. He didn't laugh. A slow, wide grin spread across his face, revealing teeth so white they were a hazard to aviation. "A secret suburban lair. For your jet," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with unholy joy. "You magnificent bastard. It's the most beautiful, most illegal, most American idea I have ever heard." He slapped the table, making the salt shaker jump. "When do we start?" A week later, a fleet of slick Rick's trucks descended on my house. The sign out front read, "Ramirez Contracting, Luxury Pools and Backyard Escapes." The project had begun. Rick's crew was a motley collection of characters who looked like they belonged in a biker bar, not a gated community. There was Fingers, a wiry electrician who could hot-wire anything. Heavy D, a man the size of a refrigerator who operated the excavator with the delicate touch of a surgeon, and a pair of twin carpenters, known only as the Gnomes, who spoke in their own coded language. The work was a masterpiece of misdirection. To the outside world, we were digging a pool, a very, very deep pool, with an unusual amount of reinforced concrete and steel I-beams. Brenda, naturally, went into high alert. Her house was perfectly positioned to give her a bird's-eye view into my backyard. The curtains in her upstairs window twitched constantly. One afternoon, a drone buzzed over the fence line, a tiny, whirring spy. Heavy D, without even looking up from his lunch, picked up a half-eaten apple and threw it with a lazy, perfect arc. The apple connected with the drone's rotor. There was a fizz, a puff of smoke, and the drone dropped out of the sky like a stone, landing right in a freshly poured cement footing. We never saw it again. "She's persistent, I'll give her that," Rick said, clapping me on the shoulder. "But amateurs play checkers. We, my friend, are playing three-dimensional intergalactic chess." Brenda escalated. She filed complaints with the city about the noise, the dust, the number of vehicles. Each time Rick would magically produce a permit, a variance, or a notarized letter that left the city inspector shrugging and apologizing for wasting our time. "He's digging, Chad!" I overheard her screeching at her milquetoast husband one evening. "There's too much digging for a pool! He's building a bunker! Or a missile silo to attack the HOA. Or a deep end, dear." Chad's voice trembled back. "Pools have those." Meanwhile, my story had taken on a life of its own. I did a few interviews, coached by a slick pro bono lawyer who saw my case as a First Amendment crusade. I was calm, self-deprecating, and always brought the conversation back to two things: the desperate need for more registered organ donors and the hilarious tyranny of overzealous HOAs. I became the face of every person who'd ever been fined for leaving their garbage cans out for an extra hour. Lily was home, recovering faster than anyone expected. The color was back in her cheeks. Her laughter, once a rare and precious sound, now filled the house again. Every evening, she'd sit by the window and watch the secret agents build my bat cave. The climax of my legal troubles came unexpectedly. The city of Charleston, facing a PR nightmare and a populace that had firmly sided with the Jet Dad, offered me a deal. They would drop most of the serious charges, reducing it to a series of traffic violations and a hefty fine. The catch? I had to remove my Learjet from their highway impound lot within 48 hours. If it was still there after the deadline, the deal was off and they'd throw the book at me. It was an impossible task. A checkmate. My pilot's license was suspended. The jet's registration was frozen. No legitimate transport company would touch it. They thought they had me. They didn't know I had Slick Rick. I called him. Rick, they gave me 48 hours. There was a pause on the line, then a low chuckle. 48 hours? Leo, my friend, that's practically a vacation. Don't you worry. We're about to conduct a symphony of logistical badassery. What followed was Operation Jetlift. It was a covert operation conducted under the cloak of darkness. Rick's team, augmented by a few cousins from out of state, descended on the Charleston impound lot at 2 a.m. They looked less like contractors and more like a team of mercenaries staging a coup. The security guard on duty, a large man named Earl, was a fan. He'd seen me on the news. Rick handed him a signed photo of me, which Rick had presciently had me sign earlier, a box of donuts, and a crisp $100 bill for his troubles. Earl suddenly found himself very interested in a crossword puzzle in the back of his guard shack. For the next 6 hours, my backyard crew transformed into a pit crew from hell. Using a massive mobile crane and 2 oversized flatbed trucks, they worked with silent, stunning efficiency. The gnomes, chattering in their strange tongue, expertly unbolted the jet's wings. Fingers disconnected the delicate electronics. Heavy D operated the crane, lifting the massive fuselage onto the first flatbed with a grace that defied his size. The wings followed on the second truck. The entire convoy was covered in tarps and on the road before the sun came up, looking like nothing more than an oversized, peculiar shipment of industrial piping. They drove through the night, taking back roads, a ghost convoy carrying my very illegal, very disassembled aircraft home. Weeks passed. The pool was finally finished. My backyard looked immaculate. A pristine new lawn, a beautiful stone patio, and a small, elegant pool house at the far end. To celebrate Lily's clean bill of health, and to thank the community that had rallied behind me, I decided to throw a barbecue. Everyone came. Neighbors who'd previously only nodded at me now shook my hand and clapped me on the back. Officer Miller, off duty and in a Hawaiian shirt, was there, munching on a hot dog. Even Brenda and Chad showed up, their presence a black hole of suspicion in an otherwise joyous atmosphere. Brenda's eyes darted everywhere, searching for a single blade of grass that violated a bylaw. After everyone had eaten, I stood on the patio and clinked a beer bottle with a spoon. "Hey, everyone. Can I have your attention?" The crowd quieted down. "I just want to thank you all, from the bottom of my heart, for your support, your donations, your kind words. It's meant the world to me and to Lily." I gestured to my daughter, who was chasing a butterfly on the lawn, full of energy. "And as you can see, the main reason for all this craziness is doing just fine." A round of applause. "I know," I continued, my eyes finding Brenda in the crowd, "that I've caused a bit of a stir in our quiet little community. A bit of a ruckus. And I know some of you," I gave her a pointed smile, "are still a little concerned about my extracurricular activities. You're worried about property values, and I get it. So, in the spirit of full transparency, I wanted to show you all that the backyard renovation is complete, fully up to code. and will in no way negatively impact the character of our neighborhood. I pulled a small remote from my pocket. It had 2 big red buttons. "Brenda, you might want to watch this." I pressed the first button. With a deep hydraulic hiss, a massive rectangular section of my perfect green lawn began to retract. It split down the middle and slid apart, revealing a smooth, paved runway, complete with embedded landing lights, stretching from the patio towards the pool house. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Jaws dropped. A half-eaten burger fell from someone's hand. Brenda's face went from smug to confused to horrified. "And for the pool house," I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. I pressed the second button. The front of the pool house split open and folded upwards like the door of a futuristic hangar, and there, gleaming under the newly activated interior lights, was the reassembled Learjet 35, my jet. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, Officer Miller started to laugh, a deep, booming laugh. Then a few others joined in. Soon, the entire yard, except for one small, fuming corner, was erupting in cheers and applause. Brenda, however, was not cheering. She looked like her brain had short-circuited. She sputtered, her face turning a shade of crimson that was definitely not an approved earth tone. This is a violation!" she shrieked, finally finding her voice. It was shrill enough to shatter glass. "A flagrant, egregious violation of every bylaw this community holds dear. Section 12, subsection B, paragraph 4. No unauthorized airfields. This is illegal. I'm calling the police." "Already here, Brenda," Officer Miller chuckled, taking another bite of his hot dog. Slick Rick, who had been enjoying a rack of ribs by the grill, wiped his hands and strolled over, holding a thick, bound document. "Actually, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "it's not an airfield. It's a water feature-adjacent subterranean vehicle storage facility with a reinforced turf-covered access point. Fully permitted, fully inspected." He opened the document and pointed to a page. The city was remarkably cooperative once we explained the unique storage requirements of my client's vintage vehicle. You signed off on the preliminary plans yourself, remember? Pool and extended subterranean garage. He held out the paper. There it was, at the bottom of a page filled with technical jargon she'd clearly never read. Brenda Higgins, President, HOA. Her signature in a loopy, self-important script. The look on her face was my trophy. It was better than any medal. It was the Mona Lisa of schadenfreude. Her meltdown was spectacular. It was a full-blown, arm-waving, shrieking public spectacle, all of which was being gleefully recorded by at least 30 different smartphones. The video, titled HOA President Has Full Meltdown Over Secret Jet Hangar, had 1 million views before dessert was served. The HOA board, facing a recall petition signed by every single resident, including Chad, quietly and unanimously voted to remove her as president the next day. The city, seeing the genius of Rick's permit jujitsu and not wanting another PR firestorm, officially closed my case with a time served and a fine, which the GoFundMe covered with plenty to spare for Lily's college fund. A few months later, life had found a new, better normal. Lily was back in school, acing her tests and finally able to join the soccer team. My pilot's license was still suspended, but I was appealing it, and my lawyer was optimistic. We were in the backyard, lounging on the patio. The lawn was closed, a perfect green carpet hiding my beautiful secret. "So," Lily said, sipping a lemonade, "when are we taking the jet out for a spin? I was thinking maybe a weekend trip to Paris." "I was thinking next weekend," I replied, "but maybe we just go to Disneyland, and this time let's try to use a designated airport. It's less paperwork for me." She looked at me with that familiar, mischievous glint in her eye. "Where's the fun in that?" I laughed. From the street, we heard the rumble of a moving truck. It pulled up to Brenda's old house, which had sold in a single day. A young family got out. A mom, a dad, 3 loud kids, and a golden retriever. A giant, unassembled trampoline was being unloaded from the truck. It was a vibrant, chaotic, wonderful shade of bright blue. I leaned back in my chair, soaking in the sun and the sound of my daughter's laughter. The neighborhood was still Harmony Creek, but the harmony felt a little less forced, and the air was finally clear for takeoff.